I don't want you to be intimidated by sewing curves. I think that you can master this technique, and I want to show you how you can do it using one of my patterns. So this pattern that I have, it's called Robina, and it features that heart block, same like I just showed up here, and it's offset by a simple single chain, so like an Irish chain, if you will. And so you can make this pattern. It's written in both a baby or a lap size and a full, like large throw size. The throw is 74 inches square, so not quite big enough for your bed, but you could certainly do it if you added some borders or added another row and column, whatever you wanted. But the main point is it uses pieced curves, and that is something that can be a little scary if you haven't done it yet. And I want to show you how you can. You can do this. You can piece curves, so you can go forth and you can make all the pretty things in all the ways that you want to. And we're going to do it by making this pieced block today. So it's a heart, very timely and appropriate because it is almost February. You know, Valentine's Day is coming up. You can make one of these blocks in an afternoon. You can use it for a pillow. You can put a few together. You can make a table runner or a little wall hanging. Or, you know, if you're feeling pretty ambitious, go make a quilt. You've got time. It's not that long, right? We've got 3 weeks till Valentine's Day. Plenty of time to make a Valentine's Day quilt. So anyway, I'm Kate with Due North Handmade. If you like these videos, please make sure you like this one and subscribe. If you have questions, leave them in the comments. I try and get through those and answer as many as I can. I'm also on social media, again, at Due North Handmade. So go find me. Let's hang out. But until then, let me show you how you can sew these curves. Let's get going. I've pre-cut the fabric pieces for this block, and so I'm not going to do that here. All of the dimensions are in the pattern, so if you've got that, you'll know exactly what to cut. I'm going to set these aside, and I'm going to set these aside for now, because those are not going to be the pieces that I'm going to cut the curves with. But I am going to use some of these here. And so how are we going to get these onto those? I'm going to start by showing you how I prepare my templates. Again, this is in the pattern, so when you download it or purchase it, you will have these templates as part of it. I just use my regular rotary cutter. It does dull the blade, but you know what? We should be changing our blades pretty often anyway, so what's just a little bit of paper going to hurt anything? Cutting out this template too. I'm starting with the straight edges here. And we're just going to go and whip down and remove those. Now, how are we going to do this middle bit? So you can hold it and wing it. Be careful of your fingers if you do that. Use a glove of some sort. I might hold it with a ruler so that my fingers are somewhat protected here, and kind of go down and along that curve. You could certainly use scissors as well. We have that template. And then for the outer curve, I do like to use my ruler for this. And so I'm just going to line up my ruler on the end, and I'm going to rotate it as I go so that I'm cutting that curve. Boy, it's hard to pick up today. And I'm cutting that curve without damaging my fingers. I'm going to use one of my rulers or my magnets here to hold that down because I don't want it to keep slipping. And now that's in the way, so we'll just go the rest of the way. All right, so we have our templates cut out. Next, the inside curve is going to be my colored pieces, so my reds. My outside curve is going to be my background. So starting here with the inside curves. Again, you can use a ruler, you can use your fingers. If you use your fingers, use a glove. You can use, if you've got a magnetic cutting system, you can use that. And so that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to cut it through. And then we've got, oops, a little bit is connected there. And we have that one cut. Going to do the same with the other piece. Now, if you really are good at this, you can stack them and do more than one at a time. I'm not going to do that today. Okay, there we go. Now, we've got our outer curves that we've got to get done. So again, just going to line that up. These are symmetrical both ways, so you can line it up on the front or the back side of the fabric. Doesn't really matter. We're just going to do the same thing. Now I have cut, or I've made these templates a little bit oversized. So if your cuts are not exactly precise on the outside, that's okay, because we're going to trim later. And then same with the inside of the curve here. And got one more. All right. Again, I must have a little bit of a dull spot on my blade or board right there because it has been catching right at the same spot each time. All right, we've got our templates and our pieces cut. So now here comes the fun part. How are we going to get that sewn into there? It looks like at first glance it shouldn't match, but we've got to take into account the seam allowance here. So we should have an overlap on both pieces here. So what I do is I mark the middle and I line up the middles. So I'm going to finger press this to mark the middle of the piece. And I'm going to finger press this one to do the same. And now we have some choices. So one way, let's use our pins. So I'm going to line this up. I've got my finger press middle, finger press middle. I'm going to start by joining and matching those two pieces up right at the apex of the curve. I'm going to stick a pin right along it. There we go. Then I'm going to do the ends. So the ends, these are actually going to line up that way. So I'll show you this again without my hand in the way. This end is going to be against this end. So we have to get this rotated all the way down. And then I like to stick a pin in it this way so that it doesn't rotate on me as much while I am sewing it. And then I'm going to find a place in the middle and put one more pin in. I'm going to be careful not to pull either one too much, but I want to get them lined up so that there's an equal amount of fabric on either side. Okay, so that is my seam that is ready to sew on that half. Now let's do the same on this half, rotating it so we're lining up the straight edges. And then going to ease it down and find the part in the middle. Oop, got a pucker. Find the part in the middle where they're roughly equal. All right, so it looks kind of funny right now. That's all right. Another way to do it, and this is actually my favorite way to do it, I use the super fancy really hard to find sewing notion, otherwise known as Elmer's glue. And I'm going to glue this rather than pinning it. So I've got it open just a little so that I don't have too much that's going to come out at any time. And again, I'm going to finger press it to find my middle on both of these pieces. And I am going to put a little bit of glue right on the edge. And I'm going to use that to keep the two pieces together. So again, lining up the middle, and I'm just going to push it down along the curve all the way down. Now I use Elmer's school glue because at the end, it can be washed out when the quilt is washed. So it's not going to stay hard and weird for all of time. Once I'm able to get it down, I'm going to use my iron and just press that slightly because that's going to help set the glue. So I'm going to do that real quick. And that is ready to go. So now doing the same over the other half, which my glue may have dried, so I think I need to put a little bit more on. Because that's another thing, right? It's made for kids. It dries quick. And it's not going to damage things. So if I get it on my cutting board, oh well, I will just get a damp cloth and wipe it away, and it's not a big deal. Just like if they get it on your table, not like the super glue that my son got on my counter the other night. That was not so easy to remove. All right, and I'm not quite even at the end there. I'm not going to worry about it. Again, these are slightly oversized, so we're going to trim it at the end. That's okay. Quick little press to set that just right along the seam. And there we go. So when I press it, I'm not going to put it down because I don't want to warp this, but I just go right along the edge. And there we go. All right, so now is the fun part. Now we got to go take this to the machine and sew it. The first thing I'm going to do is lower my stitch length. So for curves, the shorter your stitch length, the easier it is to get around that curve rather than the straight. So I'm going to go down to about 1.5 rather than 2.5. And that's where we're going to sew. So now, starting with the piece that I have pinned, I start in the middle rather than on an end. I find it's easier to adjust as you go, and then you have less margin or less here that you can mess up on. If you start at the end and then you've got one that you're pulling too far or the other, then you could get some big discrepancies on the other side. I find that starting in the middle works best, but play with it different ways and see how it works for you. So we're going to start right there in the middle. I'm also going to slow this down a little. Going slower helps. And we're going to start right there in the middle. Got my locking stitch. Going to remove that pin, and I'm just going to carefully keep my 1/4 inch foot right along the edge. Adjust the fabric as I go. My knee bar is really handy here, so I can keep my fingers on it and ease out that little bit of fabric so I don't get a pucker. Removing the pins as I go. And at the end, we should be more or less, oops, I have a fold over here. Well, I'm gonna have to take that out here. Hold on. Going blind, I managed to get a little pucker on the side. That's okay. Let's get our unstitcher. If you're like me, my seam rippers disappear. I don't know where they go. It's like they have a little seam ripper hideaway somewhere in my sewing room, and they're like, ha ha, Kate's not gonna find us when she needs us. All right, got a little pucker out. That's all right. We're just going to back it up a little. Go right over that seam just a little bit to keep those stitches locked in. Here we go. I'm going all the way to the edge with a little detour. Then for the other side, again, we're going to start at the middle, go to the edge. I'm going to start from this side this time. And I'm using the feel of the cloth through my fingers to make sure that I'm not getting any major foldovers or puckers on the back side. You can use a stiletto if you like to help keep that fabric down. I'm going to use the pin a little bit here to make sure it's staying more or less aligned. You know, use what you got. Doesn't have to be fancy. All right, remove that pin. And there we are. One of our curves, is now pieced. We'll just have to press it, and I'll show you that next. But before I do that though, I'm going to sew the other one, this one that I've glued. Now this one, because I've glued it and set the glue all the way around the edge, I'm just going to start on the end on this one, and because I don't expect with it being glued down that the fabric's going to be able to shift too much back and forth that way. So we're just going to go all the way through. And this is one of the reasons why I like to glue these seams rather than pin them, because it makes this part more straightforward and a little quicker. Now you might notice that I'm not being super precise for this curve with the edges lining up completely. Like I said, these are a little oversized, so I've got some wiggle room width-wise and height-wise on the final block. But if you're doing something that is more precise, you gotta be real careful about getting those edges lined up precisely. All right. And there we are. These are sewn together. Then I'm going to take you over to my pressing mat so you can see how I'm going to press this seam on the back. All right, so ignoring the fact that my pressing mat is very dirty at the moment, I'm just going to show you, do we press out or do we press in on a curve? Do we press open on a curve? Just like any other seam, you can do it any way that you need to. So I'm going to go in on this one. The pattern will specify usually which way to go. This one does as well. For demonstration purposes though, I'm going to show you both in and out. And you can see what it looks like from both sides. So I gave it a light press from the back side to align that seam the direction I wanted it to go. And then it's from the front side that I'm going to do the good press here. So we have curve number one. And since I went in with that one, I'm going to go out with this one. And again, I'm going to give it a light press from the back just to get that seam going the right direction. And then from the front, give it the good press. Okay, and there's curve number two. back to the cutting mat, and I will show you now the rest of the block. All right, so here we go. I got the 2 curves, got the rest of my pieces. So the first thing I need to do is I need to trim these to size. So we're gonna get the ruler, and I need to go check my pattern because I don't remember what the size is. All right, so here we are, and now we need to trim these to size. The size that is needed is stated in the pattern, so you'll see that when you get in there. But one important thing you need to keep in mind is you need to maintain a 1/4 inch from the top of the curve to the end of the block so that when you sew it into the next piece, you're not going to lose the top of your seam. So, knowing what I need to know, I'm going to check that I'm going to be able to get that allowance there from that side first. So 1/4 inch there, and then I've got my size for the rest of it from one end to the other, and we're whack out the top. All right, lining it up on the other end and just going to even out that bottom. And then I have to go either side. So if you've lost the middle fold, which you probably have from pressing, I'm going to add it back again so that I know where the center of my block is, so that I'll be able to get it more or less even on both sides here. So I want to make sure that I have a 1/4 inch at least on either side, again, for the seam allowance. And I'm a little bit narrow. Again, I'm not going to worry too much. Okay, there's one. Doing it again, make sure I get a 1/4 inch seam allowance there. And again, let's find our middle. All right, and now we have our trimmed curves ready to go. All right, so to make this block, we're going to arrange it like so. So I'm going to sew this 4 patch together first, the rows together, and then together. So back in a moment. So it looks like this now with this 2 pieces sewn together, and now I'm going to connect these 2. And there we have it. So the next part, because it's going to be on point, I'm going to work on my setting triangles for this part. And from there, that means the 2 pieces that I've cut previously, I'm going to cut them in half on the diagonal. Again, this is all listed in the pattern, so following it step by step here. And then we're going to be adding them more or less like so. So I'm going to do 2 opposite ones first. So these 2, and then I'll do these 2. If you have a directional print and it bothers you that they're going to be going different ways, don't use a directional print on the background. I don't mind it. I think it's a little bit fun, and especially if I'm going to be making more hearts out of different red toned fabrics, I'm okay with a little bit of chaos. So, all right, coming in, we've got those 2 on. I've had them pressed, and now we're going to add these 2. All right, here we go, back again. So the next part of this pattern, I'm going to have you trim this block down to size. Because we're working with some tricky pieces like curves and some biases and on point, I've made it so that it's a little bit bigger so we can trim down to get the precision that we want. So how to trim this when most rulers are going to be 6.5 or 8.5 inches wide. There's a few ways. If you have something like a stripology ruler, that is certainly an excellent choice. So we are going down to 10.5 by 10.5 inches. So the midpoint of 10.5 is 5 1/4. So I would take the 5 1/4, get that lined up, the 5 1/4, and put it right down the points of the heart, the bottom point and the point in the middle. And then I'm going to use that to guide my 10.5 inch trim on that side. And then I'd flip it and of course do the same on the other. If you don't have a stripology ruler, you can use the same idea with your regular ruler. So we know it's going to be 5 1/4 from that point. So there's a 5 1/2, 5 1/4 there to that point. And so now we can trim this side. I'm going to flip it around. Again, line up the halfway mark, 5 1/4, through the points of the heart and trim this side. Now another way you could do it is find the middle, 5 1/4, this direction, and go one side, make it even, and then flip it around, and then trim your other side. So actually, let's show you that now. So this is not quite so critical. The only thing we need to make sure is that we don't chop off our point there. So let's find our 5 1/4 point. Make sure we have at least 1/4 inch there at the bottom. Line it up straight with the side edge. Go down a little bit more, make sure I don't trim off that point. And there we go. So now for this end, I'm going to put it at the 10 1/2, line up the edge against the side of the block, line up that line at 10 1/2 on the edge of the block there, lop off that little bit halfway, move my ruler up, make sure again that we're even there, and finish lopping off that little bit. So now I have a 10 1/2 inch squared heart. You could stop here if you want to do something with a 10 1/2 inch squared heart block. It is a little off center. That's okay. Or continuing on with the pattern, we're going to add our side borders and then our top and bottom borders. So the side borders are the same width. We're just going to add those on. Back in a moment. Here it is. And again, now we've got the top border, which is our thinner one, and our bottom border. And that's going to nicely center that heart into the middle of this block. And sew those on, and then we'll have completed the heart block from the Robina quilt. And here she is, pretty little heart, ready to go. So this is my way of sewing up a little bit of love on this day as we're getting ready for Valentine's Day, warming things up a little here in Minnesota. There's a lot going on, and if you know what's going on in February, late January of 2026, you know what we mean when we say we just need a little bit more love. And so now we have the lovely Robina heart. So ready to go into the pattern, offset with that chain. So we have some pretty, just happy Valentine's Day, fun way to sew some curves. So I hope you've learned something. I hope that you, if you haven't tried curves yet, that this is a way that you can maybe think about starting to tackle them. It's not as scary as you think. I know you can do it. So go forth, so happy, and thank you for joining me here today. If you like these videos, please make sure you're subscribing them so you know when they come next. And until then, happy quilting. Bye, everyone.